Hey everyone, I wanted to go over the new and exciting news that we got for Hunter Rise Sunbreak that's set to release on both Nintendo Switch and on PC on June 30th. And today what I wanted to do is the official third video of this A First Look series that I've kind of put together, going over all of the concept art for a very specific brand new monster introduced for Hunter Rise Sunbreak. If you've been watching my channel, you know that I already did one of these videos for both Malzeno and Luna Garen, where I kind of broke down everything that the concept art shows us and tells us about those monsters. One of the monsters that has been pending is of course Garangolm, and that's because usually Capcom has been kind of randomly dropping concept art for these monsters sporadically, and they basically didn't do a lot of concept art when it comes to Garangolm up until recently, where we not just got a handful of brand new images, which we're going to go over 4 in total, but we also got a trio, pretty much Malzeno, Garangolm, and Luna Garen concept arts together, showing us a little bit of brand new ideas as to what they could ultimately mean if these monsters are actually going to be fighting together against the hunter. So first and foremost, let's start off with that trio set of images, which there's 2 to go over. First and foremost, when you're looking at the image here, in the boxed text right there that you see on the upper left, it says the 3 monster set. That's all that it says. When you look at the Garangolm text to the left side of the image, it reads as follows: it is said that its true power is only revealed to hunters at a moment's notice. And of course, it looks like it's ready to pretty much attack that hunter that is kind of standing in the middle between Garangolm to the left, Luna Garen to the right, and of course Malzeno up on top. On the right side of the image, you see Luna Garen, and the text that says is as follows: stuck between the 2, there's nothing to be concerned about, I can handle both of them. So it's basically speaking like in a first person type of perspective that is basically not that much of a concern. It's not concerned about Garangolm, and it's most certainly not concerned about Malzeno. And this is something that we saw in the other concept arts as well, where they kind of depict Luna Garen as kind of like bravacious, ready to just kind of take down any monster that gets in his way, and is not really too concerned about itself or being endangered. Of course, on the top right of the image, we have a description for Malzeno, and it reads as follows: it looks down atop his menacing perch, ready to pounce, full of self-reliance. And in parentheses, it wouldn't mind getting his hands dirty. So it's talking about if it doesn't necessarily need to fight, it won't, but it certainly has no problem due to his self-reliance. And this is one of the things that Malzeno has kind of be depicted about, and this is something that we're going to see in the other image as well, that kind of like Luna Garen in that same regard, it just pretty much has no issues taking on any monster. It doesn't necessarily seem too concerned about winning or losing. It's just kind of like ready up for anything. Moving over to the second concept art, we actually now get to see a couple of turf wars, and in the first one we actually get to see Luna Garen and Malzeno kind of going at it, and the description reads as follows: this is a turf war where both swing and bounce around to see who's eventually pinned. So pretty much the way that they describe it as is like this turf war is going to be all about whichever monster gets to be on top, that is going to be depicted as the winner. Now, of course, presumably you would expect Malzeno to win. Usually that's how these things go. But it'll be interesting to see how Luna Garen gives it a run for its money. Now, I think the most interesting out of the 2 is, of course, the one that we see here with Malzeno versus Garangolm, because the description is very interesting on top of the art that we're seeing right there. It reads as follows: it is expected to warp around behind its target as it shrouds itself in a mysterious black cloud. And this is basically something that's kind of been rumored if it's going to have some type of warping ability or anything along those lines, because it is a vampire monster at the end of the day. Vampires are kind of expected to face shift or kind of like turn into like, you know, little bats or whatever, kind of move around and then just disappear and appear somewhere else. This kind of been a trait of vampires and the way that they're depicted in games and novels and things of that nature, and we haven't necessarily seen anything with Malzeno like that. Now in this specific image and this concept art, we do see the little bugs that it has around it, those little creatures, those red glowing ones. They're still yet unnamed. We don't necessarily know what their full depiction is. We know they shroud him, they surround him. They might have something to do with the fact that his powers come from them. We don't necessarily know. It might be a symbiosis type of thing. We simply just have no idea. So we're just gonna have to wait to see in full game how they actually handle this specific turf war. But finally transitioning over to the actual Garangolm concept art, and the only reason why I showed those other two is because he's depicted in them, and I think those are the two cooler ones of the concept arts that we have received lately, which I do think they're pretty great. But we're moving over specifically to the Garangolm concept art, and the third image. To the right side, you kind of see him picking up a couple of stones, and it says, "The strength is in pure display, yay." Like, yeah, like it's excited, roaring type of a thing. As is lifting up that rather heavy boulder. We've actually seen this kind of stuff in the game itself. There's a specific move that it does where it's just kind of lifting heavy boulders and kind of tossing them at a hunter. On the bottom text on the right side, it says, "It's also careful not to get caught up in the way of its own self-destruction." So basically, as it's kind of like pounding on the ground, creating havoc on the floor, presumably rumbles and stuff like that, it makes sure not to get caught up in kind of like the destruction that it's causing. You do also see on the left side, Garangolm kind of sleeping with birds and flowers and stuff on the left side. And there's a really good distinction for that. And that's because in the next image, on the fourth image that we have here, we actually get a little bit of a closer look as to what that is actually depicting. On the fourth image here, on the upper left side, pretty much the description reads, "Its heavy tails and the shovel-like silhouette." So it's talking about how his tail, and this is actually one of the things that you notice in the gameplay clips that they put up, but we don't necessarily actually ever see him use his tail to attack anything, and that is because his tail is serving a specifically different purpose that we simply have not seen it used in combat before. In the right side of that specific same image of the tail, or the back end of the tail, it says this cross-section tail has a distinct shape to it, and it's also referencing the fact that it's kind of like a big claw hooking down to the floor. On the right side of the images, we kind of see Garangolm eating something off of the ground, and the description reads as follows: "It often eats soft top oil that's been removed." So basically what it's saying is that he's actually eating dirt. That's actually what he's actually being depicted to be doing in that very specific image. And the reason for that is on the lower left side of the image, on this concept art, you actually get to see him walking around with his tail kind of like on the ground. And the description basically reads, "It also hoes the land," referencing directly the upper right image, where it basically uses his tail to kind of like remove the topsoil from the dirt, and then it just kind of picks and chooses whatever it wants to eat, and it eats pretty much the ground itself. That seems to be what it's trying to do. On the right side of the image, where you kind of just see it laying down and sleeping, it says that often flowers will blossom from the ground as stirs, and it basically loves to get a good view from them. So it will kind of like, not only is it referring to this specific image, but remember the one that we just saw on the other one where it was just kind of like laying down with birds landing on top of it, is sitting like on a flower field kind of a thing. So it basically creates flowers on the ground that is kind of hoeing with his own tail. It kind of like eats the ground a little bit, and then eventually flowers will blossom, and it's kind of like making gardens. Essentially, that is what they're trying to say. Basically, that Garangolm kind of like creates, you know, his very own gardens to kind of chill and hang out at, which is really interesting and something that you wouldn't necessarily, you know, see depicted into the game itself. Moving over to the last concept art that we have of Garangolm, we see a couple of images of different headshots. The mouth kind of open, a little bit to the side, and the right side is kind of showing his scales, kind of like in his body. And on the bottom left side of the image, it just basically says, "The front is rock-like," basically referencing to his like hardened face. It's talking about the sides of his face, his forehead, his chin kind of a thing. In the middle of the image, you see the head kind of like opening to the side, and the description says its chin is formed from 3 hardened materials. They don't tell us what those materials are, but they are basically saying that it's kind of like made out of like presumably topsoil, presumably rocks, those kind of things. It is one of those type of creatures made out of the stuff that it eats. And on the right side of the image also is kind of like depicting him having like flowers in the back, and the description reads, "It's also been confirmed to have flowers blooming on top of his back." So they're basically confirming that not only is it going to eat soil and kind of create gardens on the floor and the dirt itself, but it's also going to have flowers and things growing out of his back and out of part of his body as well. Remember that it does seem to have moss effect on one of his paws. I believe the last one, the right one, is like lava powered, if you will, fire powered. So it is going to have that benefit of having constant growth coming out of his body due to the water, you know, and plant-like substances. And this is pretty much that effect of like having flowers, moss, and anything you can think of, grass, if you will, you know, in that regard. So that's pretty much the 3 concept art specifically that we got for Garangolm, and the other 2 that we got for the 3 lords, which Garangolm is also depicted in as well. I love to go over these type of concept arts because I think they give us a better clue and a better idea of what these monsters ultimately are about, and the ideas that the developers took to put them into the game and make sure that they are fully depicted when it comes to like lore and stuff like that. I think it's always interesting that they try to like fully envision these monsters and give them a proper place in the world of Monster Hunter. But if you're brand new to my channel, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Hit the bell to receive notifications when the videos go up. And as always, thank you so much for watching. See ya.